Our next speaker is Tracy Kidder. Tracy Kidder is a contributor to The Atlantic and The New Yorker. He's earned a Pulitzer and a National Book Award in 1982 for Soul of a New Machine. More than a decade later, Tracy Kidder met Dr. Paul Farmer while in Haiti reporting on American soldiers working to reinstate Jean-Bertrand Aristide's democratically elected government. Mr. Kidder met with Farmer again in 1999 to create The Good Doctor, a profile of Farmer published in The New Yorker in July 2000. His research for this profile was the starting point for Mountains Beyond Mountains, published in 2003 by Random House. Some of his other best-selling works include House, Among School Children, Old Friends, and Hometown. Among School Children, a narrative of 1 year in the life of a 5th grade class and its teacher won Kidder the Robert F. Kennedy Book Award in 1989. In introducing him to you, 3 things he said seem to sum up the perspective, at least for me, that he's gained in writing Mountains Beyond Mountains. The first is the genesis of the title itself, when he said that Mountains Beyond Mountains, a Haitian proverb, means both that opportunities are inexhaustible and that when you surmount one obstacle, you merely gain a clear view of the next one. And when he wrote, "From the moment I saw Zanmi Lasante out there in the little village of Kangé, in what seemed to me like the end of the earth, in what was in fact one of the poorest parts of the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, I felt I'd encountered a miracle in the life and work of Paul Farmer." And finally, in an interview, when he was asked, "Has your life or outlook about life changed as a result of spending time with Paul Farmer and writing Mountains Beyond Mountains?" he said, "It's not my place to make a fundraising pitch for Farmer and his organization, Partners in Health. Well, actually, I don't know why it isn't my place. I happened onto something remarkable, and I sat down to try and describe it to others. I hope that what I've written is artful. I believe it is at least accurate and truthful. And one true fact is that Farmer's organization, Partners in Health, represents a real antidote to despair. A person with a little money to give away can send it to Partners in Health and be certain that it will be used well. 95% of the money that's donated to Partners in Health goes to pay for direct services to people who are both destitute and sick in Boston, in Russia, in Chiapas, in Peru, and especially in Haiti, where the poorest and sickest people in our hemisphere reside. A donation to Partners in Health of, say, $200 will save an impoverished Haitian from dying a horrible death from tuberculosis." I'm pleased to introduce Tracy Kidder to you.
Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. I've a few, well, more than a few colleges and universities have inflicted my book on their incoming freshmen, supposedly requiring them to read it over the summer. And I found that when I've gone to speak to the students, it is often necessary to tell them the story of my book. No. And at the risk of boring you, I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story of this book, but I hope for a useful purpose. I first met Dr. Paul Farmer in Haiti in 1994 on account of what at that time seemed to me an unusual and horrible incident. Beheading still seems horrible, but not unusual. I was in Haiti researching a story for the New Yorker magazine on American soldiers, and Farmer showed up to argue about the murder case with the Special Forces commander, and I remember vividly that evening that next to this strapping Special Forces captain, he looked rather delicate. Long, thin arms, high waist, and a nose that came almost to a point, and yet even then he struck me as extremely cocky. It was a chance meeting that's ended up consuming the better part of the last 6 years of my life, and I don't know how much more to come, but that didn't happen right away. I got to know Farmer back in '94 just well enough to get a sense of the outlines of his life and work, and just enough to know that he was almost certainly someone worth writing about, and yet I didn't pursue him for 6 years. I think the reason was Haiti. When I first saw Haiti in '94, I was really shocked. I had thought I was pretty sophisticated, worldly wise, and I'd been a soldier in Vietnam, but I'd never seen anything like this in the way of suffering and unnecessary death. And I think that when I came back from Haiti, I was trying my best to reconcile the fact of Haiti with my very privileged, comfortable, nice American life, trying to hang on to my firm conviction that I deserved all my privileges. And I knew that if I started hanging around with this guy, he was going to disturb my peace of mind. He seemed to have lost a page of my speech, but here it is. The story of Paul Farmer's life is to me like an adventure, if adventure is not too little a word, a moral adventure, a tale of seemingly insuperable obstacles overcome, livened up to near tabloid status by episodes of physical danger, threats on his life, stuff like that, during a particularly horrible time when a military junta was running Haiti. I'm not sure who's running Haiti, by the way, now. He was expelled from the country, and he sneaked back in, as he put it, after the payment of an insultingly small bribe. He has very fancy credentials now. He's a professor of medicine and medical anthropology at Harvard. He's an infectious disease specialist on the senior staff at one of the world's great teaching hospitals, the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, where he's also the director of something called the Division of Social Medicine and Health Inequalities. But he spends more time in coach class and on airplanes and in the Central Plateau of Haiti than he does in Boston. He still doesn't sleep much, even when he's on one of his long vacations, that is a weekend. And he keeps virtually nothing for himself. The closest thing, I think it's still true, the closest thing he has to a house is a little house in rural Haiti without hot water. His work imposes frequent and, for him, painful separations from his young daughter and his wife, who's Haitian. And I think it's important to say that he's not a dour ascetic. He's funny, he's irreverent, and he likes comfort and luxury almost as much as I do. I say that now, I think, no, maybe about a third as much as I do. It's still quite a lot. And I don't think a life of self-abnegation entirely suits him, and that makes his personal sacrifices all the more interesting to me and maybe all the more meaningful. In the past, I'd written books about so-called ordinary people, a cop and some carpenters and homeowners and an architect, a school teacher, residents of a nursing home. Of course, none of those people was ordinary. I don't think any human being is ordinary. You know, we all walk around with the most complex structure in the known universe resting on our shoulders. But I can say that Paul Farmer is less ordinary than anyone I ever met. He spent part of his childhood in a campground in Florida, living in a bus with his 5 siblings and his mother and father. After about 5 years of that, his father, a great big man nicknamed Elbows by people who played basketball with him, moved the whole family onto a 50-foot long, leaky old, half-homemade boat moored in a bayou in South Florida. I once said that Paul Farmer's mother, "No couch potatoes in your family," and she replied, "No couch." He was a skinny, intense kid, the kind of child who might start a herpetology club in 5th grade. When he was 11, he was given a copy of Tolkien's trilogy, The Lord of the Rings, and he read all the books in the space of a few days, and then he read them all over again. And then he went to the library. He brought the books with him, and he said, "I want more books like this." And the librarians gave him a series of fantasy and adventure novels, and he kept bringing them back and saying, "No, this isn't it." And then finally, one of the librarians, and no doubt with some misgivings, he was only 11, gave him a copy of Tolstoy's War and Peace, and sure enough, about a week later, he brought it back and he said, "This is it. This is just like Lord of the Rings." He went to Duke on a full scholarship and discovered first wealth and then migrant farm workers toiling in the fields of North Carolina. Many were Haitian. He was interested in their lives, which was so different from the comfortable life he was leading at Duke, and so hidden, I think that was very important, from that lovely campus. He studied all things Haitian, at least as assiduously as he'd studied herpetology. And after he graduated, he went to Haiti for a year, living on $1,000 prize money he'd won for an essay about the country's poets. In Haiti, he met an 18-year-old girl, beautiful, lovely 18-year-old girl, the daughter of the writer Roald Dahl and the actress Patricia Neal, and he fell in love. But if you want to hear the rest of that story, you have to read my book. He was all of 23 at the time, and he also found his way to the mountains of central Haiti and a dusty, barren squatter settlement of farmers who had lost their land to a hydroelectric dam, which I cannot, I don't want to be too political because I don't think these are political issues necessarily, but this hydroelectric dam, I can't resist saying, was built by Brown and Root of Texas, a subsidiary of the Halliburton Corporation. It was, of course, one of the poorest parts of the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. I think Farmer had gone to Haiti planning to do anthropology. I think that the suffering that he found there, he felt that it asked something more from him, something in addition. So he went on to Harvard, and in 6 years he got both his PhD in anthropology and his medical degree. But what's really interesting about that part of his life is that he spent most of those years not in Cambridge, but in Haiti, where working with friends, he and his friends began to create a healthcare system in the area of the squatter settlement. And he still managed to graduate near the top of his medical school class. When he was 27, he founded Partners in Health, headquarters in Boston. He did this with the help of a heavy construction tycoon. I use that word, actually that's not the right word for him, but named Tom White, a very interesting man in his 80s now, who told me when I first interviewed him, sometimes I think how much money I used to have before I met Paul Farmer. And then he added, but that's all right, they give me a big steak now and I can only eat half of it. He also said that he intended to leave this life without a nickel, and he's just about done that. He wrote me a letter not too long ago signed, yours penuriously. He's given millions and millions and millions of dollars over the years to the various projects of Partners in Health. These include a project in a shanty town in Lima, Peru, where quite by accident, Farmer and his colleagues, especially a fellow Harvard doctor named Jim Young Kim, got involved in staunching an epidemic of dreadful, highly drug-resistant tuberculosis, a disease that the experts said couldn't be cured in a resource-poor setting. Partners in Health proved them wrong, though, and also drove down the price of the necessary drugs by 98%. They did this with some help from Doctors Without Borders and others. And since then, 16 other countries have adopted their prescriptions for treating the disease. Farmer and his colleagues have a project in Russia where they're trying to control a horrifying TB epidemic, and they're about to begin work in Rwanda. In fact, he's there right now with Ophelia Dahl. This is with the help of the Clinton Foundation and one of their donors. They'll be setting up 2 sites in rural Rwanda, and they'll be treating the full range of human ailments there, but they'll be focusing on AIDS. Rwanda, I haven't been, but Paul tells me is in a lot better shape than Haiti, and they have high hopes for helping to begin to show the Rwandans how to deal with this horrifying AIDS epidemic, and then by extension, how to showing Africa, which isn't to say that they intend to import whole hog a model from one place to another where it doesn't quite fit, but they'll tailor it to the place. And the thing that I find most wonderful about this, at least in plan, is that while there will be doctors from the Brigham coming in and out of this project, and the main consultants to the African doctors are going to be the Haitian doctors from Zami La Santé. And I don't think I even need to comment on how wonderful that is, actually. What I think, they also have these ongoing projects in Peru that has been very successful, dealing with multi-drug resistant TB throughout the entire country. They have a small project in Mexico, a pretty good-sized project in Boston, and their most notable project still is in Haiti. What Farmer and his colleagues have done in Haiti is to prove that the entire range of human ailments, including AIDS, can be treated successfully and very economically in one of the most difficult settings imaginable in a place without electricity or clean water or roads or sufficient food. Do you all have time to read a little something? Absolutely. Oh, okay. I don't want to keep you all too late. But before Paul and Partners in Health took on AIDS in Haiti, they took on tuberculosis, and as it turns out, it was taking on TB there that taught them how to take on AIDS. And I should point out, I think that, like most Americans, I used to imagine that TB was no longer a big problem in the world, but in fact, it still kills about 2 million people all by itself. And it also is the opportunistic infection most likely to kill people in poor countries who are classified as dying of AIDS. So it's a huge problem. I'm going to read a little bit from my book about the origins of Partners in Health system for treating TB in Haiti. Forgive me if you've already read it. You can doze. At this point in the story, I've just arrived in Haiti, and I'm staying with Farmer at PIH's medical center there, which is called Zami La Santé, Creole for Partners in Health, and it's situated in the central plateau of Haiti in the village of Cange. Soon after I arrived to visit him in Cange, Farmer said he'd be my Virgil here. I think that when it came to Haiti, he viewed almost everyone as a potential subject for education or re-education. No other country in the world had been subjected to as much idiotic commentary, he said, and it would have been hard to argue the point given the fact that, for instance, the name of Haiti's indigenous religion had long since become the synonym for crazy ideas and sheer luridness. Farmer liked to tell a story about his own education in Haiti, a story about the relation between medicine and beliefs in sorcery. Back in 1988, a woman from Zami La Santé's catchment area had died of tuberculosis while he was in Boston recovering from a badly broken leg. When he returned to Cange, several of the staff told him the woman wouldn't have died if he'd been on hand. They meant this as a compliment. He converted it to self-reproach. He wanted a medical system that functioned in his absence. He gave everyone in the woman's family jobs at Zami La Santé and called a series of staff meetings to figure out what was wrong with their system for treating TB. The staff had a lively debate. Zami La Santé's community health workers, who lived among the peasant farmers, who had been until recently mostly peasant farmers themselves, spoke about the economic impediments to treatment, pointing out that the poorest patients tended to fare worst, certainly in part because of malnutrition. One health worker recited a Haitian saying, "Giving people medicine for TB and not giving them food is like washing your hands and drying them in the dirt." But most of the professionals on the staff, the Haitian doctor and the nurses and technicians, offered explanations that laid the blame in the minds of the patients, the kinds of explanations one often reads in scholarly journals. Once they felt better, but long before they were cured, patients stopped taking their pills, the professionals said. And patients did this in part because they didn't believe TB came from microbes, but believed it was sent to them by enemies, by a sorcery. Farmer felt intellectually torn. The health workers' theory amounted to a description of the kind of socioeconomic arrangement that he called structural violence. But he was also an anthropologist in training, schooled in the importance of the kinds of cultural beliefs that the professionals cited. So he designed a study. He was still a student at Harvard. The study was like a class he created and then attended as a pupil. He selected 2 groups of TB patients. During the study, each group got free treatment, the same they would have received at the Brigham. But one group got other services as well, including regular visits from community health workers and small monthly cash stipends for food and child care and transportation to Cange. Farmer hiked to the many villages of the patients, visiting all of them in their huts. This took weeks. 100 chatty Haitians, he would say, "Don't try this at home." He asked all of them, among other questions, if they believed TB came from sorcery, and all but a very few in both groups said that they did. And yet, when the results came in, the cure rates for the 2 groups were dramatically different. Of the patients who had received only free medicine, a mere 48% were cured. By contrast, everyone in the group that received the cash stipends and other services made a full recovery. Whether a patient believed that TB came from germs or sorcery didn't seem to have made any difference at all. Farmer felt puzzled. I expected to buy into the idea that what's in people's minds affects their behavior and the outcomes, he told me. And he was at a loss for explanations until he began re-interviewing the patients and called on one of his favorites, a sweet, rather elderly woman. When he had first interviewed her about a year before, she'd taken mild offense at his questions about sorcery. She'd been one of the few to deny she believed in it. Polo Chéri, she had said, "I'm not stupid. I know tuberculosis comes from people coughing germs." She'd taken all her medicines. She'd been cured. But now, a year later, when he asked her again about sorcery, she said that of course she believed in it. I know who sent me my sickness, and I'm going to get her back, she told him. But if you believe that, he cried, why did you take your medicines? She looked at him. He remembered a small, sympathetic smile, the smile he thought of an elder explaining something to a child. In fact, he was only 29. Chérie, she said, est-ce que pas comprendre bagaille qui pas simple? The Creole phrase pas simple means not simple, and implies that a thing is freighted with complexity, usually of a magical sort. So, in free translation, she said to Farmer, honey, are you incapable of complexity? And then, of course, it dawned on him that he knew plenty of Americans, he was one himself, who held apparently contradictory beliefs, such as faith in both medicine and prayer. He felt, he said, as though he hung in the air before his patient, suspended by her sympathy and bemusement. The study was, for him, a command to worry more about his patient's material circumstances than about their beliefs. From then on, all TB patients in the catchment area received the full package of services. Each continued to get what is called directly observed therapy, a community health worker on hand to be sure the patient took the medicines on schedule, and each got the monthly cash stipend, the equivalent of about $5 American, to pay for extra food, child care, and transportation to a monthly doctor's appointment at Zami La Santé. The program had worked well. Indeed, couldn't have worked better. They hadn't lost a single patient in 12 years, and Farmer wasn't about to change any of the rules. Just recently, a TB patient from a village called Mont Michel hadn't shown up for his monthly doctor's appointment. So, this was one of the rules. Someone had to go and find him. The annals of international health contain many stories of adequately financed projects that failed because non-compliant patients didn't take all their medicines. Farmer said, the only non-compliant people are physicians. If the patient doesn't get better, it's your own fault. Fix it. A favorite Doc de Paul story in the village of Caillepin was of the time, many years back, when Farmer had chased a man into a field of cane, calling to him plaintively to come out and let him treat him. He still went after patients occasionally, to inspire the staff, he said, and to give him a break from his office. So he was going to Mont Michel himself and was taking me with him. Beyond mountains, there are mountains. The proverb appeared to describe the location of Mont Michel, the most distant of all the settlements in Zami La Santé's catchment area. At breakfast on the appointed day, Farmer told the women in the kitchen his intentions. Ooh, they cried. One said, Mont Michel, Polo, do you want to kill your blanc? She meant me, of course. She wasn't being rude. The women in the kitchen called even Farmer a blanc. Usually they called him petit blanc moins, meaning my little white guy. But a blanc isn't necessarily white skin. One might say every blanc becomes white by virtue of being a blanc. The African-American medical student Farmer had brought here some months back, for instance. Some people at Zami La Santé had wondered if he was Farmer's brother, and later some had mistaken another visiting black American student of Farmer's for the first one, and when Farmer teased them about this, one of the staff had said, Farmer swore this was true. All you blancs look alike. Traveling with Paul Farmer to all over the place, I was exposed to more reasons for despair than I'd ever seen before or indeed imagined, and yet it was the most exhilarating experience of my life. I remember how I used to turn away from stories about the AIDS pandemic, flipping past them when reading the newspaper. The problem seemed too big, too complicated, too expensive ever to be solved. But here were Farmer and his colleagues saying, no, it's not too big, it's not too expensive, it's not too complicated, and here's the proof. This was wonderful to hear, and it was also daunting and remains daunting, because if we can in fact treat and prevent a disease like AIDS in a place like rural Haiti, then we really have no excuse for not doing it everywhere. There's a further moral, I think, or a point anyway, I'd like to make about my story, which is basically, the point is not ever to try to reproduce a life like Paul Farmer's, or even to imagine that maybe that could have been your life once, at least certainly not for me, but also not for young people. The point, I think, is to take heart from the example that he and his colleagues at Partners in Health, some of whom work just as hard as he does, the example that they've set, which is that a small group of people can in fact improve the world. To that I'd sort of add, I think the other message is, and it's one that I have to remind myself of, I suppose if I learned anything from this book, it's not to join the collective amnesia that's so easy to join here in America, the collective amnesia toward the suffering that's really all around us. Okay, that's the end of the sermon. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about writing, with your permission. Back when I was a college student, I just set out to write a novel, and I spent my best energies not writing the novel, but making little notes and drawings in the margin for my biographer to find. Nowadays, I take active precautions to prevent self-consciousness while writing, because in me, at least, self-consciousness is powerfully inhibiting. I try not to remember much of what I think and feel while writing, so almost everything I say aloud about a book after I've written it is a step or two removed from the thing itself. But I do remember discussing an early draft of Mountains Beyond Mountains with my old friend and editor, Richard Todd, and I remember that he said with conviction, there's a problem here, it's the problem of goodness. There was several problems, really. The first was a reporter's problem. You encounter a person like Paul Farmer, and if you've cultivated a skeptical view of the world, sooner or later you have to ask yourself, what's the catch? Where's the dirty secret? The simple but true answer is that I didn't find one. Partners in Health left its books open to me. I hung out with Farmer in Boston. I traveled with him to Moscow, to Siberia, to Peru, Cuba, Paris, Montreal, New York, Chiapas, and to Haiti more times than I can now remember. I shared hotel rooms with him, watched him at work and play, visited the sites of his childhood, spoke at length with his mother and all but one of his siblings, read everything he'd written, interviewed old girlfriends, associates, colleagues, and friends. I did look for enemies, but I only found a handful of credible critics, a couple people who didn't like his style, a couple of people who disagreed with some of his positions, and all of those were quick to say that they respected, even admired him. It's often impossible to prove a negative, of course. I can't swear that there isn't some important, nasty secret that I missed, but I doubt there is, and I do have some independent verification. Before I wrote my book, I published this profile of Farmer in the New Yorker and was assigned one of that magazine's estimable fact-checkers. I gave her lots of names and phone numbers, figuring she'd probably call all of them and maybe find others I hadn't thought of, and look for all the dirt that I'd missed. A couple of weeks later, I asked her how her research was going, and she said, "Everybody loves it." Maybe I only imagined this, but I thought she sounded a little disappointed. I believe I have the facts on Paul Farmer right, and that's essential, of course. An author of nonfiction has to have justified belief in a story, but that's never enough, especially not in a case like this. There are a lot of ways you could write accurately about Paul Farmer and leave a large percentage of readers thinking, this is a Hallmark card, or this writer is fogging up the glass. Honesty is essential, but not sufficient. You have to make what's true, what you believe to be true, believable to your readers. And there was an additional problem. The average reader might believe that Paul Farmer is for real and also feel that Paul Farmer is too much. As an old friend of mine said to me the other day, if a character like Farmer becomes believable to readers, he simultaneously can become a rebuke. He added, and the force that keeps us from not calling ourselves into question is one of the great forces in the universe. After the New Yorker published my profile, a letter came to the editors full of venom for this guy. A letter saying, in effect, that Paul Farmer neglected his family and declaring this to be an unpardonable sin. I imagine that Paul's example made the person who wrote that letter feel diminished, and to make himself feel better, he seized on what looked like a chink in Paul's moral armor. I got a fair number of more temperate reactions. For instance, several female friends said to me, he sounds like a great guy, but I wouldn't want to be married to him. After a while, it was all I could do not to say I wasn't aware he proposed. But of course, I was, by then, being defensive, and I had to admit to myself that there might be a problem in the tone of the profile I'd written. By tone, I mean something sort of out of the textbooks, something pretty broad, the attitude toward the story and characters that a writer conveys, both obviously and subtly. Tone tends to be something you notice when it goes awry, particularly when the reader figures something out about the story and the characters that the writer doesn't seem to have realized. In this case, the fact not confronted was, I think, the problem of goodness. I'm about to make it sound as though I knew what I was doing every step of the way and that I came out with something splendid. I do think this is the best book I've written, but I don't want to make extravagant claims for it. But here's what I think I tried to do to try to make my story credible and to make Paul Farmer as palatable to readers as I ultimately found him to be. I tried to make the writing vivid, not flashy, but vivid. I tried to bring the reader along with me. My travels with Farmer, collectively those trips were like a harrowing of hell, a passage through places like the Central Plateau of Haiti, Moscow's Central Prison, a really lovely place, that peri-urban slum outside of Lima that looks like the surface of the moon. I wanted to make the scenery palpable and Farmer palpable within it, to make readers feel as if they were following a little square of light through all that darkness. Or to put this another way, I felt I had to make those places of extreme hunger and illness vivid, because it was in those settings of extreme suffering that Farmer's extreme passion for alleviating suffering made perfect sense to me. In a place like Haiti's deforested and famished Central Plateau, one can at moments even imagine doing as Farmer does, if only one were constructed a little differently. And of course, I also tried to do the most obvious thing, the thing every writer does when attempting to bring a hero to life on the page. I tried to depict Paul Farmer's foibles. I hope you'll believe me when I say that I used every foible, every less than totally virtuous thing about him that I heard or witnessed, and I promise you that I wished I'd found more. I didn't hope to achieve what's called balance. I have views on the subjects of balance and objectivity, but they aren't relevant here. What I attempted was a shameless effort to promote a vision that I felt to be true, and I tried to marshal every foible and imperfection in the man that I could in the service of making my story credible. And I should apologize to him, perhaps. But the most important part of my solution, most important in retrospect, was to write about Paul in a kind of first person I hadn't used in a very long time, actually making myself a character on the page. I wasn't doing this to make the book more honest. I wasn't trying to be self-revelatory. I was trying to find a way to deal with this rebuking quality of goodness. It seemed to me that I had to present some of my thoughts and feelings on the page in order to provide a foil for this improbable main character. I imagined my first-person narrator as a proxy for the reader, and every man who was a lot less virtuous than Farmer. I don't mean to suggest that I invented this character. He's me, and he and I are in fact both a lot less virtuous than Paul Farmer. This every man would be present, first of all, to testify that Paul Farmer is for real. More important, my Yes, ma'am.
Would you mind comparing for us the process of writing this book about Dr. Farmer and the process of writing the book about your fifth grade teacher?
As I said, I don't always remember. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was to compare the process of writing this book with writing the book I wrote about the fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Ajak and Julio. Just to warn you, I don't remember a lot about the process in either case. It's funny when I'm writing, I get into a zone, but it's always the same and it's always different. I tend to write very, very fast in rough drafts. Writing rough drafts is very difficult for me. I write as fast as I possibly can, so as to prevent remorse for having written badly. And then I rewrite, and I love to rewrite. I rewrite and I rewrite and I rewrite. And toward the end of the process, I sometimes, when I was younger, I worked 16 hours a day because it was all I wanted to do. As for the research, it was very different. Holyoke's not that far away from where I live. But I did go there every single day to school, except for two. One I was sick, and the other I played hooky. With Paul Farmer, I traveled with him for an entire month, and then I traveled with him for somewhat shorter periods, sometimes for very short periods. But I have to say, usually I just take notes on everything, and I usually end up with, I think with school children, the school teacher book I had over 100, I had 150 notebooks, but with this book I had something like 70, but the proportion of really good stuff to stuff that was easy to throw away was much higher in this case, because as somebody once said, a day in his life is like a week or a month in most other people's.
Two questions. One is, to what extent is now receiving money from the Gates Foundation, some of these large public entities, changing, or are you feeling some pressure to change models or delivery service, give up some of your freedom? And the second question is, how easy have you found, in terms of the replication and scaling up of your model by others, how easy or how difficult is that?
That is a great question. So the question was, the long question, let me see, I have to remember here. The first part of the question was, getting money from the Gates Foundation and other organizations, has it sort of changed the way we do things, et cetera? And the second part of the question was replicability. Is that good enough? Okay. So the first part, actually, we've run out of money from the Gates Foundation, and we do get money from the Global Fund and now from the President's Initiative, but it's all duplicated. It is the same process that was in place in the 80s for tuberculosis, when Paul figured out that if community health workers delivered the patients meds, the patients did better, and that if they got food, they did better, and if they got transportation fees, they did better. And it was really kind of based from sitting in a community and saying, what are the needs of this community? So first it was tuberculosis, clean water, building a hospital, and then in time it was AIDS. That works perfectly, and that is now replicated through 6 sites in rural Haiti. But Jim Kim, actually, I don't think we said this, Jim Kim, after Mountains Beyond Mountains, went to WHO, and he's now the head of HIV. And actually, if you go to the WHO website, you'll see all sorts of things about community-based development. And the WHO model was based on Partners in Health, actually. It was based on Doctors Without Borders and Partners in Health, so that what the WHO model for scale up with 3 by 5, you can't have fancy labs and get 3 million people on treatment in sub-Saharan Africa, but it's patient support, building communities, treating patients with dignity, training community health workers, and how to not just treat HIV or tuberculosis, but how to build a health system. So it's widely replicated because it's smart and because it works.
Yes, ma'am. In the front.
I'm curious hearing about the risks of treating patients today in Haiti. If anybody's tried the Witness for Peace model, which effectively served at least 3 functions in Nicaragua and Central America. One, to educate those of us who put our bodies on the front lines of a war zone. Secondly, it brought back a completely different picture from what the media was painting as we came home with our slides and our stories to our communities. Polar opposite picture. And thirdly, it did relieve the risks of those providing frontline medical care. Those of us who are not trained medically, who would accompany doctors into the highest risk situations, we were banking on our white North American class privilege that effectively usually did work. I'm wondering if that's been tried to increase your medical effectiveness in the higher risk zones.
You know, I don't know too much about that model, but I guess the thing about Haiti is it's almost entirely Haitian run, from the doctors to the nurses, and really we're technical supporters, and you could take us out of the picture and nothing changes. So there's so few Americans that we haven't really had to worry too much about that.
Yes, ma'am, here.
I loved your book, and I also thought that the first person narration actually I thought was wonderful. I thought it was very effective, and it enhanced the book for me rather than alienated it. Two quick questions. One is, I wonder as a result of the book, if it led you to reflect on the state of healthcare in these United States, and not only in terms medically, but in terms of what's happening administratively and politically in the United States, which is, of course, as you know, is a huge issue today for all of us, whether we feel privileged or not. It's a huge issue. And my second question is, what are you working on now?
The first question was whether working on this book caused me to reflect on healthcare here in the United States. Actually, Partners in Health does have a program in Boston to try to bring effective AIDS treatment to people for whom standard AIDS treatment has been failing. It's a pretty good project. I have a lot of thoughts about the politics of health in this country, and of course, like everyone else, I have to try to figure out how to deal with the whole medical insurance thing. But I'm not sure. It's not that it's sort of like the question about Paul's marriage. I don't know that it's something I can really speak to now. I wanted to add just about the whole question about his marriages. I didn't mean to suggest that there's anything terrible there, only that it has obvious difficulties. It probably wasn't worth writing about. It's not all that bizarre, just difficult because he travels so much. But as for American healthcare, I did come back from this feeling that everybody, I guess I had a different idea of human rights, what that term ought to mean after this book, which is that human rights is often construed simply as political rights. But I don't know that those political rights would have any meaning at all without other kinds of rights. The right just to live. And there are countries in the world that are heading toward average life expectancies of 27. That is, I'm afraid, with apologies to the human rights community, that ought to be really at the top of their agenda, it seems to me. And I think I think it's a shame that in this country that people should not have health insurance. I think it's just absurd. But what was the other part of the question? What am I working on now? I haven't been working on anything for a little while. I've been mostly giving talks. I have a book, I think that's coming out this fall, on an entirely different subject, a book I started a long time ago about the year I spent as a soldier in Vietnam.
Yes, sir.
Two-part question. What impact has the book had on Paul's life? And you're in a tough spot. You want to tell a great story like this, but you know that telling the story is going to have some impact. Could you comment on that?
The question was what impact this book has had on Paul's life. I don't know exactly. He seems to be doing pretty much the same things, traveling all the time and fundraising. I was told, Ophelia Dahl told me, and Ed Cardoza, the director of development, that it had helped a lot in fundraising, which makes me feel good. As for the effect on Paul's life, I think he's found it inconvenient at times, certainly. And I have to admit that what I do to other people is something I'd never allow anyone to do to me. But, and I think I ought to say, because it's true, that I don't think he was really eager to have this done. I happen to know from his closest friends that they basically, when I approached him finally after almost 6 years to do an article for the New Yorker, that he didn't really want to do it, and they said, "You're going to do it. You have to do it." But he still speaks to me, and in fact, he emails me fairly regularly. So I guess it's okay. I guess it hasn't been a disaster.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that Partners in Health provides nourishment to their patients. I'm wondering how you're reconstituting the landscape to help the patients grow their own food locally.
See, I had some great pictures, but I didn't save. And so one of those pictures was actually a wasteland in Buchancara, and we're doing a tree planting project. And in addition to economic development projects through Foncosi and bakery projects, and you saw Conge in terms of the beautiful trees there. The 99% of Haiti is deforested, and you've seen in the news reports the terrible flooding that's taken place, and that's not going to change. It wasn't that Haiti got more rain. Haiti just has no trees. So I agree, it's an enormously huge issue for Haiti.
Yes, ma'am, in front.
First of all, thank you for the book. It was wonderful to be inspired for a change. So thank you very much. My next question is, I want to know about Haiti. I want to know about the removal of Aristide by the U.S. government. I'm sorry, but all we get is the press here, and I want to know what you think. And is it harder for you to get back and forth? Is it more dangerous for you to get back and forth? Those are my questions.
Okay, I'm just going to answer the first part. The problem is that it would take hours and hours to talk about the politics in Haiti. Not that this sounds a little vain or something, but I did do a piece, it was in The Nation some time ago, I can't remember when, that gives you some of the background of what in fact happened. I think it's safe to say that a great failure by the Western powers occurred, a failure to support constitutional democracy, however flawed it might have been. And I think the results have been disastrous. I haven't been back to Haiti myself for various reasons since February of 2003, but Serena has, and she can tell you a lot more about difficulties now.
Well, I guess I could tell you about the difficulties for me, but as an American, I'm already so protected. It's really the difficulties for the average Haitian. And I've spent a lot of this year in Port-au-Prince, and there's anarchy. Because I'm an American and I was working in an inner city clinic, you just get protected as an American. But for the average Haitian, can you guys hear me? For the average Haitian, they're living in inner city urban neighborhoods where there is no police force. Gangs control it. Everybody knows someone who's been shot just for walking down the wrong side of the street. And definitely there are days when there's gunshot at the clinic. There's no question. Though it's interesting that the American Embassy seems to know exactly when that's going to occur, and they ask the Americans to leave the clinic. That's happened to me on more than one occasion. The collateral damage all of a sudden becomes really up close when the UN troops are fighting with the gangs and your clinic is stuck in the middle of the gunfire. I will say the Haitian doctors just say, okay, get up, go to work the next day, dignity, composure, they are there to treat their patients. It is also very tough to get stuff out, to get people and to get supplies out to Conge and the Plateau Central, because the rebels are blocking the roads now. So I won't say it's not tougher, it is tougher. I would have liked to be able to get out there every weekend and visit the patients in Las Calvas, and it's just a little too dangerous. You can go out there for 3 weeks, but we do sort of monitor travel on the roads. But for the most part, the situation is horrendous for the Haitians.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do want to add that horrible as this is, one must remember that so far as Partners in Health is concerned, that they started in the time of the reign of Baby Doc Duvalier, and they are still functioning pretty darn well now. Their expansion has led to the creation of six new hospitals or refurbished hospitals, and they've got 2 more they're building. They continue to build thousands of new houses for people who are living in medical huts and to do water projects. So, one way or the other, they're still moving on.
Next question. Comment?
Yeah.
Yep.
How much of an emphasis is put on education and condom dispersion for people there?
Well, you saw my picture, I think, unless that was one of the pictures I forgot to say, of Joseph June and how he was a prevention worker. Tons of focus on prevention, because you have to prevent new infections while you're treating the old infections. And in particular in Conge, where people have been on treatment for a longer time, a lot of the HIV-infected patients are now prevention workers. going out with megaphones even, talking about this, standing up at conferences. Every time there's any kind of an event, soccer games, World AIDS Day, TB Day, they go and speak at schools and churches, and so tremendous amount of prevention. And then to add to what Tracy said, yeah, Partners in Health is going strong. There are 6 hospitals. They're treating 300,000 patients a year, more people than Mass General and the Brigham combined. So nothing is stopping them. The community health workers are delivering the meds. It's just a little harder, that's all.
Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering about the HIV medication, like who pays for that? Does that come out of the fund for,
Well, that's a great question. HIV, who pays for the HIV meds? That's actually a really optimistic story, and I will just be very, very short. In the beginning, Partners in Health paid for the money, and at the very beginning, the meds were $18,000 per person per year. That was just a few years ago. Got meds donated, meds started dropping in price with advocacy to about $1,440. And Partners in Health was paying then at really, really breaking the bank. And then 3 years ago, Partners in Health was the first country, or Haiti actually was the first country, and the money, a lot of it went to Partners in Health for treatment, to get money to treat HIV. And now it comes from the United States government, the other governments in Europe, through the Global Fund. And most recently, the President's Initiative, PEPFAR, the George Bush $15 billion, is also contributing. So everything is free. Every HIV, TB-related expenditure in Haiti is free.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
In reading the book, one of the things that I found personally disturbing was the effect of his life on his family. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to give us a portrait of his family life or his wife and child.
Actually, no, I don't want to do that. I don't think that it was I made a deliberate choice not to write much about that. I don't think it's, I didn't think it's a real issue then. I don't think it's a real issue now. There is a little bit in there. Obviously, it's a difficult situation traveling that far, but I really don't feel I should talk about it. So.
Could you guys repeat the questions for us over here, please? Thank you.
They are there, but I don't know anything about it.
The question was whether there were evidence of the International Heifer Project. They are in Haiti, but neither of us knows anything about them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Question? Yes, sir.
Yes, I wanted to ask you particularly, because I'm from Haiti myself originally, and being here for a long time and reading a lot that has been written about Haiti, and comparing that with things that Haitian Americans and other Haitians have written in English about Haiti, how did you manage to capture such subtleties in terms of the culture itself, the language? I mean, I assume you don't speak Creole, right?
Not even in the most rudimentary form.
But you've done an incredible job capturing the essence. It's unbelievable.
You know, I don't deserve any praise for that. It's all thanks to Paul Farmer. I mean, he's the one, he was my Virgil there. But he understands it, and he speaks Creole like a rat. I mean, I speak a few words, but I'm really glad to hear that. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was actually a question I'm glad to repeat. It wasn't. He said that in my book, the language and the culture of Haiti is well captured, and I'm glad to hear it.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm really curious when you talk about making yourself the narrator, putting yourself in the book, and talking about not really being part of, when you were talking to him and you hadn't started writing the book, was it difficult to figure out just how much of yourself to interpose in the book and still have it be a book about Paul Farmer and not you? And I do think that you did a really good job keeping that balance, but I was wondering how difficult
The question
as a writer?
Question was a writer question. How difficult it was to keep a balance between the first-person narrator and the central figure. It's a sort of for me, it's sort of, these sorts of things are trial and error. This is not a book about me. I didn't mean for it to be a book about me. It's supposed to be about an organization, and particularly the founder of that organization. I just tried to put this narrator in service of the story. To me, the choice of point of view is a choice among tools. So it wasn't that hard. It was hard to figure. I mean, it just was sort of trial and error. Where does this guy go, and which stories do I tell? And the hardest thing in writing this book really wasn't all the stuff I had to leave on the floor. I knew that I didn't want to make a great big doorstop of a book because it's and I could have, but these are tough subjects, AIDS and tuberculosis, and I hoped that it would gain a somewhat wider audience and I felt that it would if it were a little easier to read than it might others have been. But I do feel forlorn about some of the stories I didn't get to tell in my book, or left in drafts on the floor. And the one that I really wanted to tell is about the birthday party that the tuberculosis patients threw for Dr. Farmer and Haiti and their fashion show. That's one of the things I've ever seen. Didn't make the last cut.
I just think that this is a wonderful model of medical care anywhere in the world. And I'm just wondering if you have a proposal for teaching medical students that how to, not just the science, but this other part, how to work in communities.
Serena will answer most of that, but the question, the statement was that it was a wonderful model for healthcare everywhere, and I'll just answer that. I think that's true, and one of the things that amuses me most is that the techniques that Partners in Health's project in what's actually a project called PAC in Boston for AIDS patients relies on the system that they perfected in Haiti. I think that's a remarkable technology transfer in medicine from Haiti, where there isn't enough, to Boston, where maybe even Serena would agree maybe there's a little too much. And the other part of the question was
training medical students.
Training medical students.
Well, actually, Paul teaches a class at the medical school. There's a social medicine class that all of the Harvard medical students can take. I totally agree. It should be much more something that's part of the curriculum. Getting back to what Tracy said about human rights, what Partners in Health talks about is really just human rights: water, food, housing. And to try and separate out just healthcare and leave the rest behind, you can't do that, because you can't just give someone meds if they have no food. And what we really hope for is that with this incredible positive energy, with the HIV scale up, where you read it almost every day in the New York Times, that it won't just be everyone has a right to have HIV meds, but they'll also have a right to have clean water and to get their kids treated, even if their kid has typhoid fever and not HIV. So it is a great model for that.
Other questions? Yes.
Thank you for coming. And secondly, I just wondered what Paul thought of the finished work.
The question is what Paul thought of the finished book. Well, I happened to be driving along one night with, I was actually with Ophelia when he was on Fresh Air, and I had listened with great interest. He was just asked what he thought of that question, and he said something very nice about the book. He said he thought it was beautifully written or something like that, which was very nice of him to say, but he said he felt ambivalent about it, because while it was good that I'm saying this right. He said a few things like, that guy just hangs around until he finally gets you. But it was, he found it difficult in a way because he's only a part of what's now become a pretty large organization, and with people who, like I said this earlier, work just as hard as he does now. And I think, to be singled out in that way is a little embarrassing for him, and also, could create some problems. In my own defense, I knew that it had to be focused on one person and not an institutional history. And also, there's some justice in that. After all, without him, I'm not sure there would be such an organization. But I'm a storyteller, and I have needs of my own. And as a
he still talks to me. And in fact, we have pretty good times together, especially now that I'm no longer taking notes.
Tracy, I'm curious how the book has changed you and how you live your life and what you want to write about.
The question was how the book's changed me and how I lead my life and what I want to write about now. Well, it would be dishonest to say that it's altered me tremendously. I'm not, I haven't taken about poverty. I haven't gone to work in Haiti where I'd only get in the way anyway. But I did begin to see a different world than I thought was out there. A world that's much worse shaped than I had imagined. It's true. And also, I got, my friend Ophelia Dahl has a saying, she said, Haiti burns itself into your brain. And she also said one time in my presence that if Izami Lasante ever failed, she wouldn't sleep well the rest of her life. And I agree with both those statements. And as Lauren said at the beginning, quoting me, it is true that I did reflexively say to myself when I finished this book, it's not my place to proselytize for Partners in Health. And then I thought, well, why not? Exactly. And so, I have been proselytizing for Partners in Health. And because I feel completely honest doing it, and and I don't know of any organization quite like it. I'll say one more thing about that. Too often, this sounds like a very small thing, and in detail it's a very complicated thing, but a lot of organizations go into a place like Haiti or Rwanda, and they will continue to do this with very good intentions and sometimes well-funded, but they often discover, somewhat to their surprise, that it's really hard to work in places like that. And then, typically, in the worst kind of case, they very quickly declare defeat. And then in the last sort of stage of this, they end up blaming the people that were supposed to come and help in the first place. Partners in Health never does that. Of course they make mistakes. But they always, when things go wrong, the question always is, what did we do wrong? And they typically go back to the people they're supposed to be serving and try to find out the answer from them. And it doesn't sound like much. And also, I should add, they never leave. So, I do think the difference is profound. And I like an organization like that. I don't mind being a fellow traveler, at this point. While I was writing my book, I felt I had to have a certain distance, but I don't feel that way. Partly because Paul Farmer is never going to let me write about him again.
I want to welcome everyone to the second community conversation around Concord's Community Reading Project, Mountains Beyond Mountains by Tracy Kidder. More than 1,000 copies of this book have been sold here, and the book then gets passed around and read by many more people. And I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the leadership of Becky Dewey in making this project a reality, and in her and her family's years of personal commitment to changing the lives of people in Haiti. This is not just a reading project. It's a call to action and a reminder that each of us can play a part in ensuring that poverty does not remain an incurable disease. There are several steps in making that a reality. The first is acknowledging, not hiding from, how people who are poor live, shining a bright light on conditions of inadequate housing, health care and food, dirty water and sanitary conditions. You will see and hear some of that tonight. Second, it is in asking whether the, quote, bad luck of having been born in Haiti, Peru, Russia, Africa, or a host of other places means that basic human rights we take for granted in the United States is not possible, and that you must simply exist till you die. Tonight we'll show you that a different answer is possible, that it is possible to create sustainable transformation of lives and communities. Paul Farmer teaches us that mere observation and reporting about neglect is not enough, since what is often at stake is physical survival. He reminds us in his book, Pathologies of Power, that the inhuman conditions endured by so many people in a time of the greatest affluence the world has ever known can lead to explosive reactions. He demands, I think that is the right word, that actions, not just words and prayers, be taken to diminish the suffering of the poor, to enable them to have the chance of enjoying the basic qualities of life that we expect when we're born. There is an urgency to his message that the day-to-day suffering which governments of every political stripe tolerate must change. So tonight, the presentations by Serena Koenig and Tracy Kidder and our conversation with them afterwards is our next step in better understanding how each of us can help to make a difference. Serena Koenig will speak first, followed by Tracy Kidder. I expect we'll have about an hour for questions and discussion. We'll end at 9. This project is co-sponsored by the Concord Carlisle Adult Education Program and by the Concord Carlisle Read, Talk, and Share program. Our first speaker is Dr. Serena Koenig. Dr. Koenig started her career as a middle school teacher in Seattle and Philadelphia. She became a physician trained in internal medicine and infectious diseases and was the medical director of the Partners in Health Haiti programs. Like Paul Farmer, she divides her time between Brigham and Women's Hospital and Haiti. While I have only begun, I think, to get to know her, her commitment to equality and access to basic human rights for Haitians is inspiring. She is tenacious and demanding of herself and others and leaves no stone unturned to ensure that her patients get as close to the same quality of care that you and I expect. She remains a caring teacher at heart, seeking to inspire young people for her life's passion and mission, as she did some time ago at the Thoreau School here in Concord. Some of those students may be here tonight. So with that introduction, I'd like to introduce Dr. Serena Koenig.
Just tell me if you guys can't hear me over there. No one's ever said that I was quiet. Just, I do have a habit of speaking very quickly, so I'll look over and check on you guys. Oopsie. The first picture is a picture of Wilno Bellevue, and he is working in the Brigham Pharmacy, not the Brigham Pharmacy, the Conch Pharmacy. And Wilno is actually a very special person for Concord, and for me, he is the reason that I'm working in Haiti. And he is, you know, that's also how I met Becky Dewey, and he's a bit of a tie between Concord and Partners in Health. So what happened is, 5 years ago, I finished residency at the Brigham and started volunteering for Partners in Health because I just believed in what Paul Farmer and Jim Kim talked about. That, you know, we stay up all night at the Brigham trying to provide the very best care we can for that patient with a lung transplant, or that patient in the intensive care unit, or just that patient who has whatever problem they have. We're held to the standard that you do whatever is best for your patient. And I started volunteering, but I had not yet left the United States in terms of work for Partners in Health. And then one day, Paul came to me and he said, hey, you know everybody down in admitting, because you're always working in the hospital. And I've got this young man in Haiti, and he is going to die if he cannot get a heart valve. So can you go down there and get a cheap price, you know, do a little negotiating. Maybe it doesn't have to be $60,000, maybe closer to $10,000, $15,000. So I went down to admitting, and they said, okay, $15,000, and don't tell anyone, because, you know, really it's, you know, it's Haiti, and, you know, no one had really brought a patient before. And so I said, okay, $15,000. How do I raise $15,000? And someone said to me, you know, there's a sign by the road that says Grasshopper Shop and something about Haitian healthcare. So I said, well, I guess I might as well call the phone number. So I called the phone number, and that's how I met Becky Dewey, and that's how we ended up at Thoreau Elementary School. And that's why I would say, you know, Thoreau Elementary School fifth graders were the major reason that we raised the money. And then I went to Haiti to get Willem his visa, and I was shocked at the level of care that was available. I was shocked at seeing kids starving to death. You know, babies with red hair and bloated bellies everywhere. And I thought, you know, I love the Brigham. It's wonderful to be able to provide the best, that is available. But how 90 minutes from Miami can children be starving to death and children be dying of tuberculosis? So that preceded chapter 25 of Mountains Beyond Mountains by only a very short bit. I went back for a very short conference, and that's when we met John Cassus, the boy who we medically evacuated. So it would be just like any one of you guys going to Haiti. I didn't speak Creole. It was very scary and overwhelming. But it brings you to the point where you say, but this is a 10-year-old boy, and his siblings all died, and his father died, and his mom has been sitting by his bed for 6 weeks hoping we can do something. And Mass General said he can have free care. So do you look at that little boy and say, you know what, I'm sorry, you are not well enough to go on American Airlines, you have to die? Or do you say, well, we're going to find a way to get you to Mass General? That attitude is what has powered everything that Partners in Health does. And that's why, in terms of AIDS treatment, it was just 3 years ago that Paul and I were sitting in his little hut in rural Haiti, and one of the very senior executives from Merck said, it would be irresponsible for you to try and treat HIV in Haiti. They need clean water, they need food. How can you guarantee that you can keep them on meds for the rest of their life? And what if you can't pay for meds in 5 years? What are you going to do then? And I just couldn't help but think, well, at least they would have lived for 5 years. I mean, at some point, you just have to say, what would I do if it was my brother or my mother or my father? And so that same attention to every patient is what has powered the drug-resistant tuberculosis work, the HIV work, and really everything that we do. And, sorry, I guess I didn't tell them my password here. And the reason I just wanted to say that is, there's a lot of hopelessness, especially right now. Haiti is an extraordinarily hopeless place. I've been spending a lot of the last few months in Port-au-Prince, and I spend a lot of time around the American Embassy people who say, oh, nothing's going well except your HIV project. That's going great. But, the judicial system is corrupt, and it's just hopeless, hopeless, hopeless. If you go into Port-au-Prince General Hospital, there's no dignity to human life. There's a room where babies die. There's no meds. There's nothing. The doctors are on strike. So it's just one big, hopeless, horrible situation. But the antidote to that is that every person is a human being, that every person's life matters. And, Paul really started that by being the guy at 3 o'clock in the morning who is crying when a patient dies. And, the whole place is staffed by Haitian doctors. But they come out of Port-au-Prince, being trained in places where there's very little hope. But it doesn't take long for you to begin to develop hope. When you see that, your boss is crying over a patient and, the families begin to care, it's just one positive influence after another. So now that I've used up most of my time, I'm going to show you some quick slides. And you know what? I added slides and I didn't hit save, Lauren. So we lost them. Well, I'm sorry, this is technically a challenged evening. But, the first slide that I added while I was talking to Lauren was a slide on health statistics. And Haiti has the worst health statistics in the hemisphere. It also has the worst water statistics in the world, actually. So, I guess I could just tell you that it's dismal, 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 and dismal. People can't read or write, the roads are a mess. Their kids are dying of typhoid fever, diarrhea, pneumonia, but not in the Plateau Central. And that is, here's Conge in 1983. So you see the pretty dry, dreary landscape. But this is Conge now. And so when you drive up into the hospital complex, this beautiful oasis. And we, with the Global Fund money that has come to us, at the end of Mountains Beyond Mountains, we got the Global Fund money, and with that, we've opened up 5 new hospitals. So throughout the Plateau Central, we're beginning to have an oasis. There's patients waiting for care. This is the inside, nice, clean hospital. The lab, functioning lab, that's all the HIV meds that are stacked there. This is one of the community health workers. Am I standing in front of that? Sorry. This is one of the community health workers, so the patients with HIV are getting directly observed treatments. And now I'm going to just give you a couple of patient stories since I rearranged these slides while I was talking to Lauren, and I've now totally lost the order. You'll have to hang with me. Lauren had asked me to tell you about a couple of stories of patients. You know, what is it like to be an HIV patient in Haiti where it's already so horrible, and then, you end up with HIV? Well, this is what it's like to be an HIV patient in Haiti. This is Joseph June and his mother. They came to, this is a hospital in Las Galvas. It was a private hospital, actually. We ended up opening our own hospital because they would discharge any patient who they thought had HIV out of this hospital. But by this time, we were developing some negotiating skills. So we were able to keep Joseph June in the hospital. And this is him just 6 months later. So here he is, came in. When he first came in the door, he was unresponsive to any stimuli, almost dead. His family had already purchased his coffin. And here he is 6 months later. So you say, well, was that difficult? No, it was not difficult. He needed a pill in the morning, and he needed a pill at night. And that's community health worker, brought the meds to his door, and but see, the thing is, this is a situation for 6 million people in the world right now. That they're going to be dead just like this, urgently needing medication, but they could be like this with 1 pill twice a day. In terms of the WHO's 3x5 initiative, that's getting, the 6 million people like this, getting half of them on meds by the end of 2005. And I could go on a really long time, but I won't because I know I only get 20 minutes. But it's very, very exciting and very optimistic that we, 3 years ago, they were saying, oh, you can't treat HIV, people like this have to die, and now we can and we are all over the world. And here is, you say, what are you doing about prevention? This is a health and human rights seminar, and here he is giving me a talk, and actually, talking about prevention, he's one of our biggest advocates of prevention, as a volunteer, spends a good portion of his time out doing prevention work, and there he is getting his directly observed treatments. And actually, he was featured in the WHO website, and he is quite proud of that. He will tell you he is famous because his picture is on the front of the WHO website for a while. Just going to give you some more pictures here. There's Paul cutting the ribbon as they open up a new clinic. House building is a really big thing for us. This is World AIDS Day. So just to give you another quick patient story. And then I think my 20 minutes is probably up. So, what is it like to be an HIV patient? Well, this is Eve. And again, I could give you 500 of these photos and stories. So Eve, he's clearly losing weight. Things aren't going so well here. And he came into the clinic like this, and we started him on HIV meds. And then he kind of went nutty. He I think, just maybe had some underlying psychiatric disorder that kind of popped out. And he came back in and he was psychotic with his mom. And she said, boy, can you help me? And I was like, well, I'm not a psychiatrist, we're in rural Haiti, but I gave him all the sedating meds I could find, and I just kept him in clinic with me, and he would like pat the kids on the head, because we didn't have very much space, and this is kind of the way things are in rural Haiti. So, we kept him on 24-hour observation for about 6 weeks. And after a few days, he became totally normal. I emailed my brother, who's a psychiatrist, for Depakote, and he sent it through the chain and started him on his Depakote. So he was doing really well. And after 6 weeks, we said, geez, we really love Eve, and we can't stand the thought that he would leave us, so let's give him a job in the clinic. So Eve is now the doorman of Partners in Health, and his job is to figure out who comes in at what time, and he's also an accompaniment mature. He's doing great on his meds. He got married. He's got a little kid named Ivka, and they, with their mom, all live right next to the clinic in a house, and he's the doorman. So, you say, boy, is that really hopeless? It's not hopeless. It's one story after the other of human dignity and respect and just friendships. So I guess that's what I would say in my 20 minutes, that yes, the statistics are very dismal, but working in a place like Haiti is inspiring and just amazing. To see the strength and the graciousness of the Haitian people is just a true honor and joy. Thank you, and sorry for the technical difficulties there.